Good evening to all of you. Thank you all for being here this Saturday evening to deliberate on this very important issue of eradication of the social malady of child abuse from our society. At this moment, my mind goes back some 30 odd years to 1989. At that time, I had just recently joined as an assistant commissioner in Savanur subdivision in the old Akhanda Dharwar district of Karnataka. At the time, it was the largest subdivision in Karnataka. I was young and it was my first posting. My husband and I were also beginning our life together as a newly married couple. One night, around midnight, we were woken up by loud banging on the door. We were surprised as our government quarters was located at the fringes of Savanur town, surrounded by government offices, a large playground, and a government school. So we had no neighbors as such. When I opened the door, I found a group of about 25 boys on my doorstep. Some of them were nervous, they were hanging behind. Others were angry and indignant, pushing forward. There was a small room at the entry foyer which doubled up as my home office. I called them inside and asked them what the matter was. Why have you all come here at this time? Are you in any kind of trouble? Do you need any help? After they had gotten over the first shock of being called inside and my rather gentle inquiry, the words came tumbling out as several started talking together at once. The issue was simply this. They were hungry. These were students, residents in the local social welfare hostel. The warden of the hostel was not feeding them properly. That day, they had not eaten anything except ganji, rice gruel, that morning, and it was past midnight already. Some of them had gathered their courage to approach me, but there were over 50 children in the hostel, including young ones. We saw you when you were inspecting the new building, they said, referring to my visit the previous evening to the new AC office building under construction. So we thought we will come to you and ask for your help. So, what to do? I did not immediately have cooked food available, but as newlyweds, we had a lot of snacks and sweets available at home. My husband immediately distributed these to the children at the home. Meanwhile, I called my Shiristadar and Tasildar, who were my deputies. We located the nearest hotel, woke the proprietor up, who in turn woke up the cook, and the meal was prepared, transported to the hostel, and the children fed, all in less than 1 hour. By that time, the hostel staff, the warden, a number of local officials, even a few curious onlookers had all gathered around my home, and they followed us to the hostel too. This was unheard of. The new AC feeding the hostel kids. The social welfare hostel had never seen, and likely never did see later, as many visitors as it did on that dawn. Anyway, it put me firmly on the map of Savanur, charted the course which brought me to Youth Empowerment Department later, and opened my eyes to the realities which an outsider often fails to perceive. This is just one instance of how the child and childhood itself is abused in our country. Abuse is everywhere, within the home, in school, in public spaces, from parents, families, neighbors, and strangers. This is why, when we address the prevention and eradication of child abuse, we have to look at two aspects, the regulatory and the societal. On the regulatory side, India has a plethora of progressive child-related legislation. Their constitutional underpinnings are to be found in Part 3, Fundamental Rights, and Part 4, Directive Principles of State Policy, which guarantee rights to the children of India under the following articles. Article 14 that mandates that citizens of India, including children, must be treated equally before law and must be given equal protection. Article 15, which, while prohibiting discrimination, makes special provision for women and children. Article 21, under which every Indian has the right to adequate food, shelter, and clothing. Article 21A, that mandates free education. Article 23, which prohibits trafficking, and Article 24, which prohibits employment of children under the age of 14 years. While the normal constitutional remedies are available for violation of constitutional principles, there are specific legislations to protect child rights and prevent child abuse. These include the Indian Penal Code 1860 under sections 83, 292, 293 and 305. The Guardians and Wards Act 1890, the Child Marriage Restraint Act 1929 amended in 79, the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act 1956 amended in 1986, the Women and Children's Licensing Act 1956, Probation of Offenders Act 1958, National Policy of Children 1974, Bonded Labor Abolition Act 1976, Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986, National Policy on Education 1986, National Policy on Child Labor 1987, Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act 2000, the Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Regulation and Prevention of Misuse Amendment Act 2000, the National Health Policy 2002, and the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012. Taken in totality, these laws encompass the freedom of the child and her civil rights, family environment, health care, welfare, education, leisure and cultural activities, and special protection methods. The child's rights to survival, to minimum standards of food, shelter and clothing, to live with dignity, to be protected from all sorts of violence, to be protected from neglect, to be protected from physical and sexual abuse, to be protected from dangerous drugs, to freedom of opinion, and to freedom of expression are all guaranteed by these laws. India is also a signatory to the United Nations Conventions on Rights of the Child since 1992. The basic principles of the CRC are non-discrimination, best interest of the child, right to life, survival and development, and the right to be heard. Encompassing survival rights, developmental rights, protection rights, and participation rights, the CRC also introduces 3 optional protocols on the sale of children, child prostitution, and child pornography, the involvement of children in armed forces, and the communications procedure. India has also framed the National Charter for Children in 2003, underlining the inherent rights of every child, and the National Policy for Children 2013, reiterating its commitment to safeguard, inform, include, support and empower all children within its territory and jurisdiction. The Ministry of Women and Child Development, extending its commitment of the 11th plan to create a protective environment for 40% of India's vulnerable children, implements the Integrated Child Protection Scheme, underlining prevention, promotion of family-based care, financing, integrated service provision, a feasible care plan for each child, and standards for care and protection. To implement the scheme, a 4-tier service delivery structure comprising the Central Child Protection Society, State Child Protection Society, District and Sub-District Child Protection Units. In alliance with NGOs and civil society organizations, the ICPS provides oversight and standardization for pre-existing and evolving child protection schemes in India. From this narration, it is clear that there is no lack of commitment or dearth of legislation and institutional structures to protect and nurture the child. Yet, atrocities continue. Recently, we heard of a case where a child suspected of theft was lynched by a shopkeeper and his family. Every other day, the media reports one more incident of the abuse, including sexual abuse of young maids, students, child labor by employers, teachers, relatives, in homes, schools, child care centers, and public spaces. When protectors become predators, society is helpless or indifferent. The assault on minors isn't new for India. Over 1 lakh cases of child abuse were enrolled under the POSCO, which started from 1980 to 2019, as per information gathered from high courts. The answer to the question, would we be able to keep ourselves from assaulting children and saving our children from getting assaulted by others, is sadly a no, backed by empirical and anecdotal evidence. There is a conspiracy of silence about child abuse, as about so many forms of criminality and inhumanity in India. So, when you see or learn about a case of child abuse, don't stay silent. Contact the police on their hotline number for immediate assistance. Alternatively, Childline 1098 can be used to report any child abuse. Take photographs or video clips or voice recordings of the child abuse as evidence. Share the evidence with the police station having jurisdiction over the matters where the offence was committed. The police shall register a zero FIR and upon lodging of the FIR, start the investigation. If it so happens that the police station refuses to lodge an FIR or to record any information, a copy of such information shall be sent to the Superintendent of Police or the Assistant Commissioner of Police, along with a statement that the police station refused to lodge a FIR or record the information in question. After official reporting of abuse and lodging of FIR, the matter goes to the competent court. Be prepared to stand witness. This is what is required from you. This is what is required from society. Take the battle to the field. Thank you all very much. Jai Hind.
Hi, this is Fatima Agarkar, and I'm the founder of the Agarkar Center of Excellence. And it is indeed an honor and a privilege to be one of the panelists talking about what I consider a very, very important topic, especially because I'm from the education space. And I was just mentioning to the co-founder of McMarvin that a lot of what we see in our classrooms, a lot of what we experience as educators, as trustees, as management, as consultants in the education space has a root cause somewhere. And I mean behavioral problems, I mean challenges that children face in forming relationships. And a large part of our research over the years, I've had the pleasure of being in this industry for 20 years, tells us also that it is rooted in some form of child abuse or neglect, perhaps a harsh word in some instances. But as I walk you through the presentation, you will recognize that abuse is not only just violence, it could also relate to neglect. What I love about this conversation this evening as part of this webinar is the fact that we have young entrepreneurial professionals who have come together to actually collate something that will hopefully put India on the map. I was also very intrigued that in India, we have statistics, but it's all scattered. We do not have any melting point for that one place where all the information comes together. In my little research, because I wanted to put together a presentation to share my perspective, I had to do my research, and I realized that US, Australia, Europe, they're organized. They have organizations, there's dedication, there's statistics that's available as a one-stop shop. So I'm hoping McMarvin's effort to collect this research and actually not just talk about the problem. I'm a commerce student. I remember my TYBCom exams. I was learning about census data of 1963, and I'm giving an exam in the 1900s. 1992. So it bothered me that we date our data, and we're not talking about what to find in terms of solutions. So I love the topic prevention talks because it's actually aimed at solutions. What I understand McMarvin also has is this incredible artificial intelligence capability, and I'm a huge tech fan, and an organization that's contributed to research with the whole COVID-19 scenario tells me that if that AI can now plug in and see and analyze and sieve through the data that perhaps exists in this country and bring it together, these solutions will help. I'm going to selfishly say, because I'm an educator, it will help a lot of us in our classrooms. So I'm going to begin with my presentation. I have a couple of slides. I always believe the audio visual helps, and words make a difference for those who just don't want to listen to me and they just want to read for themselves. So I'm going to begin. We're very used to the word pandemic. We associate it now with the coronavirus. It's going to become like, nobody says photocopying, they say Xerox, because Xerox was the first company that created that technology to duplicate, to photocopy. I'm going to say that pandemic will be associated to coronavirus, but there was a pandemic 100 years ago as well. Child abuse and neglect is defined, and I think US leads this as an epidemic. It's not just related to the US, it's not country specific, it is sort of a global tragedy. I'm going to begin by using a quote, a brilliant one by Brown. Childhood trauma does not come in a single package. Do not associate child abuse as simply something that's physical, something that's sexual. It could even be those words that a parent uses over and over and again. It could even be what a babysitter or a nanny or a didi in our houses are using to kill the morale of the child. That is also defined as abuse. So childhood trauma is not coming in one single package. So let's talk about this global strategy. I mean, when I was looking at those numbers, WHO, CDC, the governments have data published, including our Indian government. I'm going to say that's a bit dated data. Every year, billions of children are affected. Billions of children affected. And the WHO defines this trauma in two parts, 0 to 14, 15 to 18, they're still children. We keep thinking about children as someone under 10. Up till the age of 18, when they have a right to vote, they are considered children. And you know what statistics tell me? Statistics are overwhelming. That's the 15 to 18 age group that has the maximum abuse, which is staggering because these children are then going to go into industry and form their own relationships and quite frankly incapable. Staggering statistics. You know what? Statistics has also told me this is gender neutral. This isn't about boys are getting affected less and girls are affecting less. We in India think it's always the girl. Actually, statistics in India do reveal it's the boys that have been more physically abused than the girls. And that's a staggering statistic. So it's gender neutral. This is like our coronavirus. It did not care whether you were top 10 strata of society or the bottom. It did not care that you were in the middle. It affects everyone. It's affecting everyone. In fact, if the India statistics, whatever is published of it, and the global statistics are any evidence, we find that the recent trend indicates that it's the affluent households that are demonstrating more child abuse and neglect. Scary, because we would assume this was a problem that was related to lack of education. We're talking about educated families now leading the statistic. So it's demographic independent. It doesn't matter what caste, what creed, it's not community specific. This is across the board, which is even more scary, which is why I call it the epidemic. So different types of abuse. I mean, a lot of the speakers in the previous prevention talks have talked about it in detail, including a psychiatrist. So I'm not going to dwell too much into it, but for an academic discussion, it's physical, it's educational, it's emotional, and for me, it's economic as well. So types of abuses are important to know, because when you know the kinds, you're also able to trace the root cause, which is what you hope to eradicate. What broke my heart and should break everyone's heart is the fact that every 5 minutes, a death is reported on account of child abuse. I mean, we're talking about starvation. We're talking about, children being abused and dying. And this is your evolved society. This is apparently the society that has everything. This is apparently the society that's supposed to have the solutions. This is the society that is considered the best from all the eras that existed. And this is the society that's reporting a death in every 5 minutes. It's almost staggering to note also that the India statistic might just be one death in every 3 minutes. So it's lower than the global, statistic, which is even more scarier. I mean, we have our problems, and this is compounding to our problem. I have to bring this quote out by this young lady. She's someone who's battled child abuse, but she has mustered enough courage, has enough spirit. She's actually a successful entrepreneur now, but this is her quote from back in the days when she was getting out of it. I think repressing what happened is what saved me in my childhood. I was able to use my imagination to create happy events, but a little girl can carry only so much on her own. She managed to escape that. She managed to battle with it, and she managed to turn it into a positive. Challenges, she changed it into opportunities. And by the way, she's helping a lot more children. But what about those who don't? What does that mean in terms of impact? And I think US leads this research in terms of their data collection to say that it's staggering. It's not only what the children are experiencing now, but this is the deep, dark impact that it will leave generations to come. We will not be able to break the chain. That chain and the cycle continues, because look what's happening. Brain damage, developmental delays, learning disorders, problem-forming relationships, aggressive behavior that's leading to violence, crime, drug and alcohol abuse. They want to numb themselves. Acute depression that's leading to suicide. Economic crisis. I mean, look at what's happening in our country today. Because we didn't mask up, because we didn't take precautions, your healthcare is overwhelmed. We've done nothing to build capacity. It's led to an economic crisis. Just when our economy was showing that upward trend, we've gone down again. I mean, World Bank has, devalued us. Our stock market is hit. Just when we thought we were getting out, we're faced with another economic crisis. Please understand, child abuse hits cripples nations. It's more an economic crisis than anything else, because these are the children that go back into industry. These are the leaders that will govern us. These are the leaders that we may be voting for. These are those doctors, lawyers that you will find in corporates. But if their childhood has been traumatized, please understand what is it that is going to lead us in the future. Deep dark. So, a lot of people, I've been in conversations entire last week because I wanted to make sure I get different perspectives in. I always believe it's nice to hear what people think about the problem and what their solutions are, because I believe laymen have the best answers. I mean, today I'm overwhelmed when I see mosques and temples being converted into COVID centers. No government has said this. They're doing it. Citizens have come together. Trustees of these temples and mosques have come together and saying, enough. We have funds. We collected the funds for humanity. We are going to put those funds to good use, and we are going to convert these. I mean, they're not allowing women in temples, but they've opened their world out to everybody, irrespective of caste and creed. So it's citizens doing it. So, a lot of people ask me this, but how Fatima, you're trying to tell me caretakers, parents, family are the ones who are contributing maximum to this abuse? Yes, they are. That's an overwhelming statistic. 65% of cases reported are reporting evidence of what is happening in families, not someone else, not a predator, their own family in some form or the other doing that, contributing that. So people ask, how can a person abuse a child? I mean, any person. And that's when you ask, how many good people do nothing about it? So I'm so glad that McMarvin is talking about these prevention talks, bringing people from all walks of life. By the way, I was found on LinkedIn. I was found as a matter of message to say, will you contribute to a perspective? Because we'd love to hear it from you, given that you are in the education space. It only takes an effort to be able to do that. So how many of us are guilty of not doing it? I raise my hand. This is a passion topic, but up until now, I never spoke about it. So if there are more people that come out and want to do something about it, can you imagine the force of this collective effort? So let's again, I keep going back. Unless you know the root cause, how can you find a solution? Unless you know the problem. Like we know with coronavirus, it has to do with arresting the lungs. It's immediately getting into the nasal passage. There are patches on the lungs that are seen, and that's really the problem. So if you have mild symptoms, it's only fever, which is the good thing. They come out. So you have to know the root cause, and the root cause could be attributed to many things. It could be lack of preparedness or awareness when families, when young ladies give birth without having an understanding. For various reasons, they make the choice to have the child much early. And they could be a victim of rape, sexual abuse, or really bad choices that they have made. Unfortunately, there is no preparedness. I mean, we in the education space talk about it. Parenting should come with a degree. There must be awareness. You must know what it entails. Because when you bring a child in this world and you are not prepared, you will have a host of problems. And so it's also lack of awareness. People don't know this is abuse. People don't know that when I'm constantly negating that child, when I'm constantly putting one child against the other, when I'm constantly comparing, that is also a form of abuse. So there's just lack of awareness. Basically, in our country, it is sheer lack of education. It is, you cannot only be teaching facts in school. And I stand for that industry that focuses on a lot of the knowledge and facts. We don't do enough to create empathy. We don't do enough to help these children. We don't do enough to help families. It's lack of education as well. A lot of the dropouts are having children. The educated ones decide to only have smaller families. So the problem really is those who don't have education are actually producing more children. Therefore, lack of preparedness. It is financial. There is a huge strain on it. And, when you do not have enough resources, and I mean money, there are challenges, and we know that. I'm worried we come out of this pandemic and the next thing is going to be rioting. Because if if there are not enough equitable distribution of resources, people are going to react. And financial is a big part of child abuse as well. Environmental stresses, the pressure of society, the pressure of coping, the pressure, all of that. Substance abuse is the simpler one. It's straightforward. It is a large contributor to it. Also, mental health challenges. People are reporting 1 in 6 children, adults, depression, mental health challenges. They just, it's not only languishing, it's not only just feeling low, it's now leading to acute harassment of their ability to remain happy, and therefore react or emote in different ways, which creates that abuse. It's a chain effort, and I feel it's an effect that is a circle. It's a vicious circle. If I was abused, the only way I know how to live is by abuse or being a victim of abuse till I can then become the bully, and I feel happy and I feel validated to do that. So that circle, we don't break the chain. That chain, I beg your pardon, continues and continues. So now we know what the root cause of these problems are, right? And in all of this abuse, there are essentially 3 parties. There is the one who abuses, there is the one who is being abused because the person doesn't get out, and then there is the bystander. I'm going to say that perhaps us as society, as community, is a large part of this bystander. I'm not saying, simply those people who know it's happening and are not doing anything. I mean bystanders, people who know there is a problem at large, but are not doing enough to create awareness or talking about it. And there are social media handles today everyone can use. If that collective force comes into effect, we would have a lot more attention to this to make it a national priority. Child abuse and prevention in this country is not on an essential list. For that matter, schools are not on the essential list either. The problem is, if you don't understand the importance of schools and education, and you don't understand the importance of preventing child abuse and neglect, this problem will be that chain that will never be broken. So the bystanders is us as societies, anyone, organizations, laymen, anyone who does nothing about it. So what's my solution? What's my strategy? I mean, I've established a context. I've told you what I know. I've told you these staggering statistics. I've told you what's overwhelming us. And I've told you it's an economic crisis for us. It's an epidemic. So, if the pandemic has taught us one thing from the first wave to the second wave, it's we didn't build capacity. We didn't build capability. We did not prioritize. And those are my 3. We have to, quite frankly, we're 40 years late, but even so, even if we can save the children for the next 80 years, I think we would have done ourselves a favor as a society. We're going to have to make it a norm. We're going to have to make it a policy. We're going to have programmatic activities to help. We're going to have to build capacity and build capabilities. And how are we going to do it? I've actually closely looked at the US administration for youth, families, and children. It's under the US Department for Child Welfare. And I love that they have these dedicated units, continuously adding on to research. There's a dedicated arm. You know why? Because they're treating it as a national priority. I keep saying this, we'll make efforts as laymen. Yes, there'll be temples and mosques converted into COVID centers, but that's a bandage effect. That's putting a bandage on a wound to stop bleeding. But to heal the wound, we'll need a dedicated effort. And any entrepreneur or any organization will tell you it has to be a top-down approach. Top-down means center, followed by state, followed by local administration, and then the community and the neighborhood at large. I love the US model, and I'm going to take the liberty of using their terminology. This has nothing to do with me. I love it. It's called Gateways to Prevention. there's a positive spin to it. They're thinking about solutions. So that's the US Department of Health and Human Services that dedicates an administration for children, youth, and families. And this would be my message to our Honorable Prime Minister. Have a gateway to prevention, have a department for health and human services dedicated to children, youth, and families for the prevention of child abuse and neglect. So what is the goal? What is the goal, for this prevention? I mean, you have to have direction, right? And that's what I love that they have put down in their charter. I've taken the liberty of adding my thoughts to it, what they had built on. This is a fundamental need as a democratic nation, and for all the democracies in the world, we have a right to live with respect. Our children have a right to live with respect. So it's a fundamental need. It's almost like water. You need air. You need food for survival. This is as important as that. It's a fundamental need. It's not a want, it's a need. We have to arrest this plague. There's a pattern to this because I told you we're not able to break the chain. It's a cycle that continues. So it's almost like the plague. It's almost like coronavirus. We're not able to control those numbers because it's spreading. So we have to arrest this plague. And this is what, prevention talks should be focused on. We have to limit this devastating, long-lasting impact. We coined the word break the chain. I'm going to say break the chain for child abuse as well. Somewhere we're going to have families in lockdown. Somewhere we're going to have families freeze their frames. Somewhere we're going to have families orient themselves to restrain themselves so we can reduce this devastating long impact. And you know what? It's going to be really expensive for our country. We have starvation problem. We have malnutrition problem. We have lack of education problem. We have lack of employment problem. We have problems in this country. We can't add to this problem if we can only start thinking of prevention. And this was another beautiful quote that I came across. Erin actually talks about it, and I have to quote her. If someone would have talked in school about safe touch and unsafe touch, I believe I would have spoken up as a child and not been victimized over and over and over again. But that day never came, which is why my mission is now to protect children from childhood I could not be protected from. So you imagine, in this day and age, in 2021, we are still talking about people who think they don't have a choice, people who believe this is their fate and this is their destiny, people who don't have an option to get out. So how can we prevent this? How can we not have many more errands, become entrepreneurs and help families? How can we prevent another errand from happening? So I've put together this kind of a charter, which has a collation of what I see. The Australian government has put together, Europe, the UK does a lot of work, and the US. And I've put together what I believe is quite a focused approach to prevention. One is going to be, yes, we've demanded a government priority. Yes, we've said create a department, but that may take years. We can't have people dying one in every 3 minutes. We can't wait for that decision to happen. Legislature takes its time. What can we do which is in our control? What can we do to control those variables and still create impact? It is going to be community mobilization. When Team India participated in the World Cup, they had something called Bleed Blue. It was a mission. It got everyone together, and I'm using cricket as a point here, simply because not because I'm a cricketer's wife, but you know what? It's one thing that unites a lot of people in the world. There's passion for sport. If we can use campaigns like that, if we can have ribbon movements, if we can have communities that come together with bands or ribbons, or just creating awareness around it and call it gateways to prevention of child abuse, it creates a movement. and you know what the movement has been able to do in this country to stand up with the voice, like change.org. It creates awareness. It makes people like me sit up and say, I haven't done enough for child abuse and prevention. Local faith communities. I strongly believe we're an emotional country. We are an emotional world. We believe in faith. Spirituality plays a role, whether you're in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, US, or China, or Australia. It does play a role. What can we do, therefore, to mobilize local faith communities to spread the message of prevention? To orient families, parents, children, children who are victimized, what to do to escape, parents who might be doing this, guilty of it. How can we change their mindset? Bring attention to it, get those kids out, channelize a lot of volunteers. I think the power of the pandemic has been that I've seen families come together to create, soup kitchens for those who don't have food. There are families donating masks. There is so much movement possible, but it's also driven by communities. So I call them clusters. Like in the Islamic community, they have something called mullahs. It's a strategic organizational structure that brings smaller communities together and makes them clusters, and those clusters become a part of the bigger one. The idea is to give food, better education, orient families to a better way of life. So let's bring in some volunteers to do that. And this can be mobilized. This can be done simply by even college students. So see how schools can participate and universities can bring in professionals. I think the corporate world plays a big part in it. The CSR departments must have it as a must do. I think every organization should have it as their own individual social responsibility to contribute, to have strategic plans, to have board reviews, exactly like the prevention talks. Bring in more people from across industry to talk about how they created war rooms, to talk about what they did to combat a challenge at the border. There's so much, because this is almost like that challenge at the border. Use influencers. I think a lot of this awareness can be created if a lot of the brand influencers can come into play. Social media is active at the moment. When we hear people that we admire talk about it, it creates more awareness. Influencers have to be mobilized. We need more male support. We need more males to come forward, to contribute, to speak, to volunteer. Let's celebrate these stories. Let's celebrate an Erin's story. Let's celebrate that little girl who spoke about what she did to overcome it. Talk about positive stories, which creates a sort of a hope, which can, mobilize communities. Galvanize society, a CSR. There are huge housing societies in our country. Use them. They have funds. Get them. Even if you can orient 500 families in one society, job done. Involve local businesses. A large part of the problem also is financial, right? It's unemployment. People don't have work. People have too much time, but don't know how to utilize it. See how local businesses can come in, see if there are employment opportunities, at least part-time. So there's money that comes in. With that money, it's better access to resources. That means it's better options for this children. Schools play a big role. From the education industry, I think we are, as a industry, we're the 5th largest employer of people in this country. Imagine the kind of families we work with. I think schools have to have this as in-school curriculum, non-negotiable. Talk about it, call the elephant in the room, get PTAs active, get student councils active, get students to participate, and get students to voice a change. Local legislations, we can start ground up instead of going top down, in my opinion. Maybe get the local corporators involved, get the local youth wing involved. I think the youth does a lot of work. I mean, even today, I've seen how these kids have created apps. literally in a matter of hours, and helped old age homes connect to the nearest hospital or oxygen cylinders or concentrators. And it took them 2 hours. In 2 hours, they were able to create that app that connected, and they had 48,000 subscribers. So imagine what the youth can do because of the power of technology. Get the message on the road. I'm just saying there are, advertisers whose hoarding are lying vacant. Just, let's connect with them and say, when you don't have an advertiser, put this message up. At least it's creating awareness. So community mobilization for me is a big one. Another quote that kept me very, very humbled and grounded. We raise predators by treating children as prey. Scary, right? This is what's happening to these children. Child abuse is actually a form of hunting. And it's scary how crude this is and how painful it is. But unless we feel the pain, we won't talk about prevention. So how do we prevent it? Media campaigns. NDTV has been really active with Corona. NDTV has always been active as one of the largest networks in our country for many campaigns: starvation, water shortage, migrant worker plight, so many. Why don't we make it a national priority, and why don't we get media campaigns in? Why don't we get media attention to it, galvanize it? Apart from community mobilization, you'll eventually need to showcase it. Otherwise, it'll be restricted to the community. How does this become a national priority unless it's spoken about? Media campaigns, outdoor hoardings, I've already spoken about it. Social media today has the single largest power. We need to get more people talking about it, even if it's children, even if it's parents. I keep saying the male voice is important. Influencer voice is important. Celebrities can talk about it, and everyone will want to make sure 80 years from now we are not treating this as an epidemic, and it will take 80 years for us to break the chain because it's still cyclical. This one actually managed to break my heart. It's about a quote that you'll have to read carefully. I understand how a parent might hit a child. It's because you can look into their eyes and see a reflection of yourself that you wish you had it. So sometimes families are so crippled, so consumed by their guilt, that often it's not malicious intent. It's simply this failure of what they were unable to change that they see in front of them, and it's almost like hitting themselves. No excuse, but we have to think of, therefore, family support. We cannot just say, how can they do it? We also have to give them solutions for what to do when they are incapable of thinking coherently. We have to help them understand what damage they're doing. Therefore, family support through counseling, by creating employment opportunities. I'm telling you, it's financial to a large extent. If they get resources, at least they can, go to professionals who can help them. At this point, they have no money, no resources. They're not even able to reach out to the right people. And therefore, they're going to substance abuse and alcohol. You're going to have mentor, and I feel the NGO tie-up. There are a dime a dozen NGOs, so many people who are doing so much work. Actually, let's bring in a consortium of NGOs who can single-handedly work, even if they're helping children with education. Why can't they even talk about prevention and child abuse? Even if they're talking about starvation, why can't they similarly talk about prevention of child abuse and neglect? Why does it only have to be an NGO related to one? Why can't we get all the NGOs to also talk about this and therefore reach out to more families? I think beginning from societies or large slums, whether it's Bhiwandi or whether it's Goregaon or whether it's Dharavi, if we can get NGOs operating as consortiums and coming together and spreading the message, and it could be through sport, it could be through music, it could be through drama, it could be through play. It doesn't have to be lecturing them. Nobody has time to listen. People have problems. This is not going to happen because you give them a PowerPoint presentation and you give them a handout and say, now don't do it. You're going to have to inspire them. You're going to have those mob dances. You're going to have to, sit in their house and help them create narrate a story and tell them, see what you're doing to your child. It's going to take a lot of effort. But I think there are so many NGOs anyway doing a lot of work. Why can't we bring them together? Community mobilizations. Families need support. Let's not judge. Okay, let's not, how they say, don't throw the baby with the bath water. Let's address the problem. Yes, there is a problem. Yes, this parent is doing it. They are not evil. They were never born evil. Circumstances made them evil. So let's help them change. Let's stop penalizing and reprimanding. Let's use the positivity of therapy and solutions to get them out of there. Because otherwise, we'll be only locking these people up in prisons, and that's not going to bring the change. Because that change continues, they're still going to be abused when they come out. So we've got to think about what we're doing and how we're doing. And you know what? Education, getting these kids into school in whatever form, mobile creche, activity centers, anything that teaches children to think better, to emote better, to express themselves, to handle themselves is the solution. So, again, simple quote, but it rings a bell. The child who attends school does not remember the abuse that happens at home or via the family. Those memories are held in another part of the child's mind. The child does not even remember abuse that happened the preceding night. Can you imagine the power of these schools? Can you imagine what replaces that negative thought is the fact that I'm learning something. I have access to tools. I can think differently. I have freedom. I have an outlet. So schools and any form of education which gets the children to negate those negative thoughts is also helping breaking the chain. So that's my preventive strategy. What more can we do? I've already mentioned CSR arms of corporates play a big role. These are HR heads who can contribute, who can spread the message. They're attached to a number of NGOs. Let's use that road. NGOs as consortium spoke about it. Make it a national priority for every country, for every state, for every taluka, for that matter. Make this a priority. Give it the importance that it needs. But that can only happen if everyone starts talking about it and it becomes kind of a movement. Extensive drives through schools. School mobilization is going to be very important. Quite frankly, it'll create that awareness. And with that, we will have children who will live carefree, playing in the sun, not living a nightmare in the darkness of the soul. Can you imagine? This quote is actually not naming the child. This quote is talking about the child as it. This child cannot become that statistic that we quote in another 80 years. This child will need to make way for many other children who will not have to live through this epidemic. And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much.